As part of the CFF Sites preseason preview series, Mike and I are reviewing camp news and notes. Preseason camp has been in full swing now. We are in the busiest 2 weeks of college fantasy football draft season. Things are heating up. We are continuously updating the guide, the projections. We're going to bring you some of what we're seeing. Again, my name is Joe DeSalvo. I am joined by my partner, Mike Bainbridge. Mike, we're just going to kind of jump around this show. We've done a lot of things, players we've loved, players we fade. We've done positional previews. We're getting to the time of the year now where we're just going to kind of do some quick hitters, bring some people up to speed on what's happening in camps, right? Let them use their judgment if whether or not they want to move people up or down in their rankings. We're going to do that because we're going to update the draft guide by the day, it seems like. And this is probably one of the biggest weekends of preseason camp coming up because now we're a couple of weeks away from the season. This is probably the last big weekend for a lot of teams wherever those depth chart questions are coming into play. This is where things start to get settled down a little bit if they ever do, right?
Yeah, I was just, reading up on Fresno State and because they play in week 0 and it's like they're shutting down camp, media is not available anymore and they're sending out the scout team to prep for Kansas in practice now. So, yeah, we're getting closer. We're just going to do a couple, we're going to do some quick hitters on fall camp news here. And this might be a repeat for some of our Discord members who are listening to this because we are posting news and notes constantly every single day in the Discord now. But yeah, we're going to hit some news and notes rapid fire here.
Before we get into that, Mike, we've got to take care of some business, right? Because obviously you see the background behind me is kind of bannered out and we've got the helmet shelf and we've got more helmets on there, right? The helmet blitz is posted on the website. We've kind of partnered with Collectible Supplies, Sports Gifts, and Memorabilia. They're working with us. And you guys, the followers, have really been chipping in and helping out. We want to reveal some of the latest helmets, and we want to give some thank yous. And here's the thing, too. If you go into that helmet blitz, there's even, if you want to kind of make part of the contribution to the show, part of maybe trash talking or call somebody out, I've got some things, Mike, we're going to get into where some of our followers have said, here's what I'd like for you to say on the broadcast. And one of them even actually asked for a shout out from you about one particular thing that I have a feeling it's an inside thing. I don't know anything about it, but I've kept this under the vest. We're going to save that one for last. Before we get into camp notes, let me just kind of give some people some shout outs. And we're going to break this into a couple of shows as we go because there's a long list, but there's a lot of people that I want to thank out. First of all, let me go ahead and reveal this background, Mike, because let me get this out of here.
I was wondering what you were doing because I think you had your background.
Look at this, man. We're filling it up, right? Joshua Worthen said, dude, you've got to get me a USC helmet. He said, go Trojans. It's down there. Brian Kinville needed the Syracuse. He's like, man, he came in third. All these guys came in third tier. Zachary Hant said, we need to represent Clemson. He that's up there. Neil Steffen got the Northwestern helmet for you guys. Bill Lubitz and Addison Butler. They were like, go Vols, put up that Power T helmet. So we got that for you guys. Jeffrey James with the Seminoles up there, up in the corner. And Teddy Aim was like, man, dude, Joe, you've got to represent my Hurricanes for me, right? So those guys coming in third tier got those helmets up there first. But look, there's a lot to think. I'm going to throw out some names now, Mike, and I'm going to throw out and save some for the next show because there's a long list. But some of the guys, Michael Laney, Salvatore Balsamo, Nathan Miller, David Barre, Sean Walsh, Salvatore Cusimano, Eric Paulin, Clark Kibido, Roderick Bailey, right? Charles Stanifer came in. He's like, man, I need Cradle of Coaches, Miami of Ohio. After we get the Power 5 conferences, we're going to get that. Aaron Friedman, Jason Humbert, David Barnhill, Brian Giles, Eddie Hamlin, Bradley Sakita, Mark Bauman, Bruce Smith, Nick Shader, looking for that Stanford helmet. I get you that. I have to get you that, Nick. Matt Honeycutt, Brett Askinas, Chris Garber. There's a lot of helmets still to come, guys, but that's a big thank you for all of you all that have chipped in, continue to chip in. And two messages before we get into it. William Brennan, always the stylin profiling guy in the 4-1 Super Fantasy League, said, Joe, this stylin profiling guy is a force to be reckoned with. Whoo! Right? So that's his message, Mike. And then Matt Klein, he's in there. At Bacon Fueled is cooking up prop wins hotter than a breakfast skillet, right? So look, guys, thanks so much for contributing to the Helmet Blitz. If you guys want to continue to help out and add to this shelf, that's very look. Thank you guys. We're gonna keep that going all year. That link is gonna stay live up on the website. It's in the collaboration part that we have about collectibles supplies and the advertisement there. It's called Helmet Blitz. Go check it out. And we're going to save the one for you, Mike, for the end of the show, man. But let's go ahead and get some of these news and notes in, man. Let's just kind of start at Notre Dame, where like all of a sudden now the Twitter feed is like, Kenny Mitchie may be ahead of CJ Carr in this quarterback spot. Are you buying that?
I don't know. It was weird because like I brought this up to you, and then you sent me an On3 article from the Notre Dame beat writer who said, "Hey, it's still Carr." But then like this insider from On3, the same company, says no, it's Minchie that's slightly ahead. So it's like a battle of the sources there.
Yeah.
As to who's ahead. We still have Carr in the guide right now. But like we've kind of mentioned this throughout the offseason of like, man, who's the offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock for Notre Dame. He does prefer a dual threat, and that's not CJ Carr. That is Minchie. So, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Minchie could win the starting job. We kind of thought that at the start. We were trying to project this quarterback room out. So, we'll wait and see. It's neither player. It's not like CJ Carr's been a high draft capital type of quarterback that you're seeking out in the first few rounds. So we still think it's going to be Carr, but you have to wait and see there.
Yeah, same thing. Look, I think the notes are, Notre Dame may have a scrimmage coming up any day. There's maybe one or two scrimmages they still have left. I'm still on board with Carr right now. We both are. But to your point, you're not really over investing on either one of these guys anyway on draft day. These are not top tier guys right now that we're going after. Now, let's look at Alabama, where Ty Simpson was named the starting quarterback, right? So we have some clarity there. What's interesting, this is something you and I talked about, so we can kind of go here for a second too. They won't have Jalen Milroe this year, right? So there's a lot more value in that receiving room between Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard. You've got Isaiah Horton, who obviously has picked up a lot of steam since he's come over. Value in all three receivers, you think, this year? Or maybe two, and it's Williams with Horton or Bernard. We're not there yet.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how good Ty Simpson is. And, it's positive reports coming out of spring and fall camp. But, it always sticks in the back of your head. Remember that game, what was it, 2 years ago now, where, they were doing that rotation at South Florida, and Ty Simpson came in and it was just atrocious. He got the start, I think, and then got benched. In the first half. So it's tough to get that out of your mind. Obviously, probably growth since then and a new coaching staff. But I think we've seen it with Kalen DeBoer, right? If things are all clicking, as they were at Washington a few years ago, you can have three relevant wide receivers. So wait and see there. I think the other thing, you mentioned not having Jalen Milroe this year, how it could impact the wide receiver production. How about you mentioned this before, how about the running back production?
Yep.
And we had a report come out yesterday that somebody, I forget the website, my apologies, but they said like Jam Miller is the guy in that backfield and nobody's really close to him. There's a lot of rushing touchdown and production to be had with Jalen Milroe not under center anymore.
Yep. Sticking with the quarterback spot, going to a couple of G5 schools, Mike, Texas State. We were talking right before we kind of hit the record button that you had kind of found out just recently that it looks like Brad Jackson's been running with the ones for at least 2-3 consecutive days now, right? That's one that's been on our radar since spring camp because of the potential in that GJ Kinney offense.
Yeah, I mean, we can't get a ton of news and notes there from Texas State. The media was during the spring, the media was not even allowed in to practices. But, it appears from onlookers that he's been running with the ones for multiple practices now. And I think, you got to kind of take some signs that like he's meeting with the media yesterday, and that's something
Yeah.
that the QB1 typically does, right?
Yep. And then South Alabama, that offense is particularly good for a good QB1, wide receiver one, RB1, right? You usually get the big three out of that offense. And anything change there at South Alabama?
No, just saw one report on 247 that Bishop Davenport, who is our projected starter, seems to have strengthened his position as QB1. And then in the wide receiver room, we have the top two projected of Anthony Eager and Devin Voisin being our wide receiver one. And it was interesting that the beat reporter said that nobody has really established himself as the wide receiver three. So that could be good
Yeah.
news for both Voisin and Eager being maybe get the central target share there.
Yeah, one place that we've kind of discussed in the last 24 hours is the switch at TCU at running back coming out of the spring. Nate Palmer, we had at RB1 there. Of course, they went into the transfer portal to sign Kaforian Barnes from UTSA, who I think only ran for about 200 yards with the Roadrunners last year, but he did lead UTSA in rushing in both 2023 and 2022. We've now have him at the top of the depth chart for TCU. That's not to say that he's going to be a fantasy monster, but the way that it's looking right now, he may have kind of jockeyed himself to the front of that depth chart right now, right?
Yeah, they're still kind of rotating, but it's one of those situations where it's been more consistently Kavorian Barnes running with the ones there. So I think the point to note there, and you kind of hinted at it, we did move Barnes to running back one, doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be fantasy relevant. I think one of the points that stuck out, like reading practice reports for TCU, is the running game has not been good regardless of who's been in that backfield.
Yeah. And then, Mike, let's go over to Arkansas. We're still on Braylon Russell right now, but there has been some steam, some momentum in the way of Mike Washington coming over from New Mexico State. I want to say we've kind of touched on maybe this on one of our last pods because New Mexico State, they had two transfers that went to SEC schools, right? Washington went over to Arkansas, and it was the other guy that went to Kentucky. Why am I drawing a blank? Seth McGowan, right? Um, but it looks like Washington could be a legitimate contender for that RB1 spot against, compared to Braylon Russell right now. I think the biggest question is will we see a true RB1 or will we see maybe some sort of a split in that backfield? And keep in mind, we still have Taylon Green there too, who's going to get his rush attempts in that offense too, right?
Yeah, that's the point that I've tried to drive home with Arkansas. Like last year was a complete outlier when it comes to Jaquindon Jackson, who was last year's RB1,
Yep.
and then Andrew Armstrong, who was the wide receiver one. And people are kind of drafting, the Braylon Russells of the world, the Omega Blakes, who we think is the wide receiver one, thinking that they're going to get that type of production. And it's just like it doesn't happen year over year in Bobby Petrino's offense. Typically, it's typically a committee, right, shared with the quarterback, which will obviously be Taylon Green. And they really kind of spread it out at receiver too. So, we might change it at some point to Mike Washington here if the, drumbeat keeps getting louder, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to matter who's in that backfield.
Yeah, well, look, let's jump over to Ole Miss and stay in the SEC too now, where we have just kind of vaulted Keywen Lacey to the top of the depth chart over Logan Diggs. This was one in the spring where could have been, any one of a number of players they have. They even have a talented freshman that's coming in that I know that I've even voiced my opinion on one of the previous podcasts that I wouldn't even rule him out from a long-term option in that offense. But right now, the momentum has swung in the way of Lacey right now. So we've landed at him over Diggs right now. That's a move that we just made in the most recent update to the fantasy guide.
Yeah, some people had Keywen Lacey coming out of spring ball. We did not. Logan Diggs was basically projected by most to be the running back one coming out of the spring. But, there was those that believed in Keywen Lacey's talent, his overall talent, and it's starting to show in fall camp. And so he's getting a lot more time with the ones. And I know there was a recent interview with offensive coordinator Charlie Weiss Jr., and he mentioned Kiwan Lisi first coming out of his mouth. So I just think the momentum is definitely pushing towards him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to say there's nothing set in stone. There's nothing that we know for 100% sure that that's the way that the depth chart's going to shake out. But we try to do is read the tea leaves with all the reports that we get coming in. And is it enough to kind of create that shakeup and change at the top? And I think from what we're hearing, what we're seeing, it is. Now, there's a couple of programs that I want to talk about. Well, first, let's go to SMU. I think that's a big one to talk about because a little bit of a pivot from where we were maybe about 3 weeks ago, because for a couple of reasons. Derek McFall, right, the former receiver, was kind of moved to running back. He had wide receiver draft eligibility at the time when we were talking about him. Since then, he's back. He does have his running back designation, but also, we've always heard reports that he's probably the most talented of the running backs on the roster, but it seems like, and I think this is where we were kind of thinking was going to happen in the spring anyway when they brought in or signed TJ Harden out of the transfer portal. It's looking like maybe, not for sure, but it looks like maybe Harden has somewhat of an edge in there just because of his overall ability to kind of couple his running ability with his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. Right now, we know Brashard Smith did that with SMU last year. We're feeling a little bit better now, I think, with Harden at the top of the depth chart right now, are we?
Yeah, you kind of hinted at it, and it was mentioned in an article there about SMU that Harden kind of looks to be the most well-rounded of the group. But everybody's kind of popping at this point. Harden is looking good starting out of camp. Chris Johnson was the first name that I saw in a recent SMU article. They got the freshman Dramico Green, who is not expected to redshirt this year. So we saw the production last year out of that backfield. But prior to that, with Rhett Lashley, like it's been full on committee. And me and you might disagree a little bit with this. I'm starting to lean towards, hey, we're just going to see 3, maybe 4 guys in this backfield, and it's going to be spread around. You look just 2 years ago, the running back 4 had 7 rushing touchdowns. So they'll spread it around if they don't have a guy.
Plus, you've got Kevin Jennings who can tuck it under and run himself, right? I mean, look, we can make the same case about the Tennessee backfield, right? We can make a case that last year was an anomaly under Josh Heupel. He typically spreads the ball around between his running backs. And to your point, I think SMU is going to be pretty darn good. I think Jennings is going to be improved. Much like we can't really identify a star wide receiver 1, I don't think we can really identify a stud running back 1 with SMU. And maybe that's their magic, Mike, is that there's a lot of depth there and no superstar. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be good for the, on-field football, but terrible.
Not good for fantasy. Yeah. Well, look, 2 things that I want to talk about, and I'll start with Clemson because I mentioned Kevin Jennings at SMU. The Clemson running back spot we may have worn this out a little bit, but there's a thought that I think it's really important to kind of get out there. I think it feels now that Adam Randall's probably going to get the first run out at running back, right? On whether or not Gideon Davidson, Ezi Amume is going to get run. Those guys are going to get playing time, right? The young guys. The question is, does one person run away with running back 1? Is it a committee? And I think about what I just said about Kevin Jennings, the quarterback at SMU, Mike, and that is, as we get deeper in the season and this season gets a little long in the tooth, if Cade Klubnik is in the running for the Heisman Trophy, there's a really good chance that he's going to probably vulture most of the 2 and 3 yard touchdowns in that offense anyway. And I'm really starting to wonder whether or not it's just a safe bet, depending on what type of league you're in the format. Maybe you just avoid the Clemson backfield altogether. I'm not so sure right now. Where are you at on that?
It's funny, we're covering we've covered 5, 6 teams now in the running back situation. I don't think I've drafted many running backs from any of these teams. So we're covering it, but I don't know that we really want to target these situations in CFF right now. I'm
But in
kind
Power Five leagues, you got to
of,
take a
you
flyer on
have
one of these guys.
You have to. To be honest, and I guess I haven't tracked this super, super closely, but I'm kind of leaning towards Adam Randall, like just holding on to the position now. I was hoping that there'd be a steady, positive momentum for one of, Gideon Davidson, who we kind of thought would potentially take that job coming out of spring, or David Eziomame. If it's like back and forth, maybe just Adam Randall is the guy this year, and maybe
Yeah.
somebody else doesn't step up. So I don't know. We'll see.
Well, one fumble could change the whole dynamic of this backfield.
Yep.
So.
We said that we talked about that with Florida State back.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talked about that with Florida State, and maybe that's for another show. But I mean, look, that's a situation too where it's like you got the young kid, you got Uma, you have you've got Sawchuck that's come in from Oklahoma, you still have Roydell Williams. I mean, the other guy that came over from Indiana,
Jalen Lucas.
Jalen Lucas, man, there's so many back. Cam Davis is still there. Those guys are not going to play, right? The running back coach said, look, we have a lot of depth, but typically when the season starts, you're going to want two or three guys. We just named five, which tells you that a couple of those guys outside of a game against an FCS school are probably not playing, right? We'll see how that shakes out. But then again, just like we talked about, Florida State opens with Alabama. They're going to put who they feel is the best back out there in week one. And to that point, performance in that game or lack thereof could determine who gets carries moving forward in week two.
Yeah, you gotta be good, and I think we're pretty good at this. We gotta know when's that pivot point, right?
Yep.
Some guys averaging 2 yards a carry, then I think we start looking towards other options when we project the teams for the following week.
Yeah, one team that I want to get into, and I think it's important to understand my perspective on this before we maybe hop around to where you want to close some things out, is we've spent some time talking about Memphis running back recently. And it's so important to talk about Memphis running back because of Cramsey's production out of his running back ones over the years, right? Particularly in the last few years over at Memphis. Like that RB1 has just been a player to target for fantasy. We had DeRoger higher in our rankings over Sutton Smith for good reason. Sutton Smith coming off of an injury from last year where he didn't play much, seems to be a full go. You see the pictures in practice. He does still kind of wear the leg brace. Coaches talking in his interviews how they want to ease him back in. But there is also the feeling that you hear Sutton Smith's names. Sutton Smith's name so much that we've kind of pulled back the reins a little bit on DeRoger and boosted Smith up a little bit. So if you guys out there have kind of seen that in the preseason fantasy draft guide, that's really it. I think there's potential there for both of those guys to be used. History tells us we're probably going to get a legit running back one, but maybe we don't. You also do have Brendan Lewis there now at quarterback, who is a little bit more mobile than we're used to seeing in those offenses too, right? So we've brought those guys a little bit close together and not as much separation as we typically have from a Memphis running back. Am I really missing anything there, Mike?
No, yeah, we definitely tried to bunch them recently because this is one of those handcuff situations, right? You want to nab the Memphis running back one.
Yep.
Where we saw a little bit of momentum for Sutton Smith. There was a recent practice report, I think maybe 10 days ago or so, where it was Sutton Smith running with the first team offense, and then it was somebody I had never heard of on the second team offense at running back. But I don't think there's anything to worry about there. I saw DeRozier. He was posted on the team Twitter page, practice photos or whatever, like a week later. So he's not injured or anything, but it's hard to find Memphis information. So we're going to take what we can find. And the recent practice report we saw was Sutton Smith running with the ones there. So I think this is a situation where you want to handcuff, you want to target both. And if Sutton Smith wins the running back one job, I would still draft DeRuzier, because guess what? Sutton Smith's been injured 2 or 3 straight years. So
Also got some wins that it seems like Joey Aguilar may be kind of jockeying his way out in front at Tennessee quarterback. Not that it makes a lot of a difference in full FBS leagues, but again, Power Five leagues, Josh Heupel quarterback, worth a stab late in drafts, right? So just momentum pulling there. Anything big that you're looking for this weekend, Mike, as far as news goes? Anything that really stands out to you that, like, man, we'd really love to get something from a scrimmage here?
yeah, I'd love to get a Louisiana Monroe report anywhere, but they have zero coverage. I would love to see something between, Zach Palmer Smith. Maybe it's Deshaun Ford. Maybe it's Arkansas transfer Tyrell Reed. I would love to get something there. We're just not going to get it. There's no coverage. That's the one that I really there's no tea leaf pointing in any direction that I've seen since fall.
Yeah, we actually moved down Palmer Smith a little bit too, just because we wanted to feel that there was a little bit more security and certainty in the players ranked above him. So we did move him back down a little bit until we get more concrete news and updates of what's going on at UL Monroe. And look, I live in the state of Louisiana. That's 4 hours for me. And I'm just telling you, there's not much news.
Why aren't you driving up there?
Why
aren't you helping out the folks? And
maybe I'll go get a Warhawk helmet. Have you seen one of those new ones? They look really sharp, man. I might have to go grab one of those. Yeah. I'll tell you what I'm looking for this weekend. And this is really big, other than the fact that I finished week 0 projections. Let me just tease that out there, right? We don't want to get them out there too soon, though, because there's still a lot of ambiguity in some depth charts. So Mike and I are going to kind of hold those under lock and key for a little bit, but those will be coming soon. But the one thing that we always look for, Mike, this weekend, which is the second to last big weekend before the season starts, and you and I talk about it all the time, injuries could be big this weekend. If teams kind of lock into those scrimmages, things get physical, a player or two could get injured. That could make a difference in some depth charts around the country. Not that we want to wish injury on anyone, but sometimes injuries they factor in, right? And let's just go case in point at Baylor this past week, where we learned that Dawson Pendergrass picked up a season-ending injury. He was going to be the legit running back too at Baylor, right? And because of that, now we've basically he's out of there. I forget who's the running back too that we have, but we've bumped up Bryson Washington to our number 3 running back now, because there's just lack of proven depth behind him, and that's probably going to lead into quite a few more touches for him moving forward this year. And there was even a case where you could almost make a case where Bryson Washington might actually be running back 1 in some drafts right now.
Yeah, we went a bit conservative, moving him from RB4 to RB3 ahead of Dylan Edwards now. But yeah, we talked about it. Like, should we move him to RB1? Because guess what? There are 4 career carries now behind Bryson Washington in that backfield. And I'm looking at that schedule, and outside of Auburn in the opener, there's
which they get at home. Right.
Yeah, they get it home. They get the first week of the playoffs, week 12, they get Utah, but at home, right? So, and then you finish out with Arizona and Houston, which is perfectly fine, right? So there's the debate to be made whether Bryson Washington should be the RB1 or not.
Anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here, man?
Let's see. No, I think we covered it. We're cranking out news and notes in the Discord. We're adjusting our rankings. We should have a good size update for this weekend. So look at those cheat sheets in preparation for your drafts. And I'm ready to go for those.
We've essentially come to the point where a lot of our preseason content is baked in. The great thing is we get the pivot because a lot of the content is digital and online, right? So that's good for everyone. I've always made this argument. I've never really liked college fantasy football drafts until you get 2 to 3 weeks away from the start of the season, just because it gives you a chance to get more news in. So that's why this is such the busy time of the year for college fantasy football drafts, guys trying to wait as long as they can to get as much information as possible, which is why Mike and I find it incredibly important to make sure that we're updating as much stuff as we possibly can. But we're going to try to do at least one more show, Mike, next week. Touch on some more quick hitters like we did today, see if there's any movement over the weekend. Maybe we'll do it a little bit earlier in the week. And then as we get into end of next week, start preparing for that week 0. And before we get out of here, Mike, we've got to get to that. We've got to get to that shout out. So for all you guys watching and listening, right, and have contributed, really appreciate it. The Helmet Blitz, it's up there under the collaboration part in the website. Get in there, check it out. You can contribute to the show, help us build these helmets out on the shelf, and make whatever shout out you want to. And here is a request coming in from Christopher Parody, if I think I have his name right. Does that ring a bell, Mike, so far?
No, I apologize.
All right, here it is.
I didn't recognize it.
Here it is. Get Bainbridge to shout out Carson Steele. Joe Kane says hi, and you know what you did.
I know Joe Kane. I talk to him frequently about the 60 teamer. I don't know the Carson Steele reference of what he's talking about.
Well, he said, you know what you did, Mike. So you're either playing coy or we're about to find out, and we're going to reveal this on the next show because I don't know what it is either. I was hoping I'd find out from you. I didn't know if this was going to make you happy, sad, angry, pissed off. I didn't know what was going to happen with this.
I don't know. Maybe I faced Joe in the 50 team, or who's asking this? Is it Chris or Joe?
It's Christopher Parody.
Oh, who is Joe Kane? Okay, yes. I've never seen that movie, by the way. That's a football movie. I've never seen it. But maybe I used Carson Steele to beat him in the 60 team competition at one point. I don't know the answer to this.
Okay, I thought you were going to tell me like you like stole him or pulled the wool over his eyes on a trade or something like that. So
no, other people do that in that league, not me.
In what league? The 60 teamer?
Yeah, we'll keep that up.
I've heard about that, but that'll be for another day. That's it. That's going to do it for this show. Camp news and notes. Again, my name is Joe DeSalvo. For my partner, Mike Bainbridge, we'll see you next week when we'll try to close the preseason out and get ready for week 0. See you guys then.